It is 7:59, and according to my computer, it says we are live. So, welcome to the final installment of the Summer Sampler. As you can see behind me, I've been busy putting my Summer Sampler together. I have a total of 16 blocks. I've put together cornerstones, and I've got it turned upside down so that you could see some of the blocks on the bottom. But I made a total of 2 blocks in each colorway, so a couple of oranges, a couple of purples, a couple of reds, and I just wanted that really scrappy sampler look. And so it is 8 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started because I believe in being on time. All right, friends, so I'm going to show you this easy peasy block. This block won't take us very much time at all, and this is block 12. And so as you can see, this just has 8 squares that are gold and 8 squares that are background. And so I'm going to use 3 strips, and let me show you what I'm going to use. So all of our strips are Jelly Roll strips, and I'm going to need 8, right? And so because these are 2.5 inches, I just multiply 2.5 inches times 8 and 2.5 inches times 8, which gives me 20. So I'm not using a full strip. And so I'm just going to go ahead and take some background and make sure that I have at least 20 inches. And I'm going to take a little bit of the color that I'm going to use on the inside. So I think I'm going to use this gold. And I'm going to make sure that I have 20 inches of that. So I'm going to lay it on my mat. And I don't have to be really exact here, because I'm going to be trimming. So I'm just going to chop off maybe 13. I'm going to save that nice little scrap for something else, another project. And I need to make sure that I have a background piece that's the same size. Now, instead of sewing a 1/4 inch on both sides like I've done for a lot of the other blocks, I'm just simply going to put both of these right sides together. And sometimes you can't tell, but I can tell because of the weave on this one. And so I'm going to put these together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down one side of my block. So who's out there tonight? Who is with us tonight finishing up their summer sampler? All right. So I'm going to sew this one. It's going to be super fast. 1/4 inch on one side. Sometimes my foot gets the best of me. I get a little bit carried away, so I just took off my shoes. Anybody else out there like to sew with their bare feet? I love to. I feel like I get better control over my foot pedal. So there we have it. Easy peasy. This block makes a great quilt. If you have a background and Jelly Roll, if you make these blocks by the dozen, you can make a really cute quilt in a hurry. And so I see that I got a couple of my friends out there already. So let me go ahead and show you what we're going to be doing. All right, so now that I have pressed this all the way down, 1/4 inch, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just set that seam, but I'm not going to press it open. So I'm just going to go straight down the line and set that seam, but I'm not going to press it open because I'm going to want to flip those seams so that they nest, because nesting seams is super important in quilting. And so don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Nesting those seams is right up there with an accurate 1/4 of an inch. So if you happen to have a little teeny tiny ruler or another ruler, you're just going to trim off anything that's over here on the side that's a little bit crooked. And then you're just going to chop off 8 of these little pairs. So you're going to line it up. I like to line up my stitch line with one of the lines on my ruler so that it's more accurate. So scooch that out of the way. Try not to chop into your block if you don't have to. And if you notice when I use a little skinny ruler, I stick my hand away from the rotary cutter. Just makes it safer. Rather than holding my ruler like this, I hold it further away. When you have a little skinny ruler, you got to be careful that you don't jump the line with your rotary cutter. So I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to keep going. It was a beautiful weekend. It was sunny. Spent a lot of time outdoors. I went to the zoo with my grandbaby. So summer is almost here, friends. This is why this is the last installment of the summer sampler, because we are going to be finishing this up before summer gets here. So now I just need one more. So I have a couple more blocks here because I need 16 total, right? Of these little pairs, 16 of one color, 8 of one and 8 of another. So let me see, do I have enough? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have plenty now to make sure I don't lose a rascal in my sewing room. Every now and again, I lose a piece. And I'm like, it was just here just a minute ago. I don't know where it went. If that ever happens to you, it's very aggravating. And yes, I love sewing barefoot. I don't know what it is about sewing barefoot, but I can feel the foot pedal, and it makes it so much easier to sew for me. And some people like it and some people don't. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you why I did not press these open. Normally, I would encourage you to press these open and press them to the dark side. But because these are going to be constructed in rows, so if you look at your block, it has this row and that row, and they're going different directions. I'm going to wait and push the seams over when I line up my rows, right? So now I'm going to show you how that works. So for row number 1, I'm going to want all of my seams to go one direction. So I'm going to start with a gold in the corner, and I'm going to push that seam. I'm just going to finger press it with my finger like this, and I'm going to run the pad of my finger and my nail across that seam on my mat, and it really holds it flat, so I don't have to even press it. So just take it and I run it. And so then I'm going to lay the next one, and I'm going to make sure that those seams are going in the same direction. So they're going that way. So they're going to my right, could be your left. And I'm going to make sure that those are ready, and I'm going to make that a pair. Now I'm going to lay my next set, my next row, and these are going to go just like a checkerboard, right? So these are going to go like this. And so that means that this block is going to be going this direction. And so it's not going to the dark side, it's going to the light side. And then I'm going to take the next one, and it's going to go to the light side. And so I'm going to make sure that everything in one row is going the same way. So I'm going to take that and sew a 1/4 inch seam. And I'm also going to take the next row, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Right? So I'll be right back. So I like to sew barefoot, and I like to go fast. So how have you guys been tonight? I hope that you are getting ready for summer like I am by planting flowers and doing fun things. And I'm playing bobbin chicken tonight. Anybody else playing bobbin chicken out there? All right. So I have row 1 ready to go. And I have row 2. And so I like to do this in rows, and then I like to put 2 rows together. And so I just take this one. All of these are going this way, so I'm going to take this middle one, and I'm just going to set my seam like this with my finger. And if I want to, I can give it a little press, because now all of those seams are now going in one direction. And now I'm going to take my other piece, and I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to make sure that all of these seams are going in the opposite direction. And so now when I roll these back together, these match up perfectly and those seams nest, which is what I love to do. So whenever your seams nest like this, and you can feel it with your fingers, then when you sew it, you don't actually have to use pins. You can use a pin if you want to. If you're a new quilter, that's kind of helpful. You can just pin right there at that intersection, right where that stitching line goes, if that helps you to keep those from shifting. Otherwise, I can just feel it. I feel that those seams are the same. But if you're a new quilter, go ahead and pin. Or if you just like it, go ahead and pin. I'm from the No Pin Club, so normally I don't pin, but I'm just showing you if you wanted to, you could. But most of the time, I just simply use my fingers, because my fingers, I can feel it. I've gotten to the point where I can feel that intersection and I don't need to pin. Now, some quilters will pin all the time and tell you to pin all the time. But some of my pins are kind of bendy. You see that pin? I run it over with my machine, and so I'd rather just pull my pins for the most part. So pinning is like one of those things in the sewing world that's kind of like coffee, right? We all drink our coffee a little bit different. Some of us like black coffee. Some of us like coffee with cream. Some of us don't like coffee at all. And so pinning is one of those things. Some people like it. Some people don't. Some people do it occasionally. Some people never do it. All right, so now we have half of our block assembled, and it's super flat. I love how flat this is. And so now I'm going to open it, and I'm going to open it and look at those intersections. They fit very nicely. If you look at the back, I'm simply going to leave that alone because it's really flat. I was going to swirl that seam, but I don't need to. And so I can simply check it out, feel it from the front, and I don't have hardly any bulk at all, which I like. And now I'm ready for the other half of this block. So I'm going to slide it up, and I'm going to lay these rows. So now these are going this way. So that means that the next row goes the other way. And so I lay my block right here, and I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to finger press it in the direction that I want those seams to go. And I'm going to lay it out ahead of time so that I don't get any of my rows confused. If you use this pattern, it's great to make a fabric checkerboard set for your kids or grandkids and take it to the park. You can get a set of cheap checkers like at the Dollar Tree, and it makes a great little travel bag. You can roll it up and you can make a complete checker set. I've made one for my kids before when they were younger and they loved it, and I'm getting ready to make another one for my grandkids. You can make it with scraps, so if you have a lot of 2.5-inch scraps in your sewing room, it makes for a really awesome checkerboard. You just need a light and a dark. And so now, doing the last thing again. So now these seams are going one way. These are going the other. So you can see these are going all this way. These are this way. And these are this way. And now I can go back over to the sewing machine just like I did before and sew these in rows. I think that your quilt block ends up more accurate if you sew them in sections and in rows rather than trying to sew the pairs and then sew them in a different way. So I like to do my quilt blocks in sections, and that's always helpful. Is that clear as mud? This block is easy. I love this block. Good old-fashioned checkerboard. So if you are excited for summer, because we are slowly coming out of lockdowns across the country, tell me what your summer plans are. So if you are excited about summer, tell me what you're excited about. Who wants to share their fun summer plans? I'm going to be working on my 16 UFOs. Yes, I have 16 UFOs, friends. And so that's what I'm going to be working on. Okay, so now it's back to the drawing board, just like I did before, right? I had one row going this way. Now I have this row going the opposite direction. And this final row, all of these blocks are going that direction. So I'll just make sure that all those seams go where they need to go. And I use the pads of my fingers to make those things behave. I don't like to wrestle with my seams. I prefer when they just nestle really nicely. And so now I'm going to sew on this side. So Lolita's waiting to see what the lockdown is going to do. I went to the zoo, even though there was a staggered entrance time. The zoo was still quite busy, and I noticed that some people were still nervous, but mainly I'm excited to be outside. As you can tell, I've been in the sun. I've been working in my yard, and I'm starting to turn brown. And I know I shouldn't be turning brown and tanning because that's not good for your skin, but brown skin is a sure sign of summer around here because I love being outside. All right, this block is easy peasy, friends. As easy as they come. If you're a new quilter, this one is right up there with the number one block to do as a beginner because a 4-patch is usually the very first block that you learn. All right, so now that I have my other half, right, I'm going to go ahead and press that downward, set that seam, press it down, and I love how this block feels. It's nice and flat, and those intersections are matching up. I like how that's looking. I'm going to go ahead and roll that half together. Same as I did before, I'm just going to tickle it with my fingers until those seams really lock together before I sew. And like I said, you can either pin it or not. Don't worry about being late. You can watch this whenever you want to. This is the Summer Sampler Series. I'm going to leave the videos up for a while. So the videos will probably stay up the rest of the summer for those who are still working on their blocks to finish. But we've got a lot of other stuff coming. If you are a new quilter and you want help adding a border or cornerstones to your quilt, let me know and I can set up a Zoom time so that I can help you with that. You can always send me an email or send me a private message on Facebook, and I'd be glad to help you. We also have a retreat in June coming up. We have a lot of projects. If you don't know what's happening in the Jelly Roll Club, just go to our website. It's www.jellyrollclub.com, and we have a lot of things going on there. So let me show you what's happening here. All right. So now that I have this block and the two halves are together, now we're just going to roll this back. Same thing. I'm going to check my intersections. It looks like they're all fine except for this little one. It's a tiny bit off, but my motto is better finished than perfect, so I'm not worried about that. And I'm just going to give it a good hard press in each direction to make sure that it is square. So I'm going across and this way. And now I'm going to measure it to see if it's 8.5 inches square. And that looks pretty darn close, friends, to being the right size. So I don't have anything to trim, and I can add my border. In this case, I have two options. I have a red that I might want to use. That looks pretty good. Or I might want to use another color. So let's see, what do I have over here laying around? I already dropped my fabric. So let's see what we have. Does your sewing room feel like the Bermuda Triangle, and whatever you set down for some reason grows legs and just like disappears, and you're sitting there going, I just had that? That's how my sewing room feels sometimes. So I think I dropped it on the floor, and I sure did, right underneath me. Ta-da! I found it. I always get excited when I find something I drop on the floor in my sewing room. It feels like Christmas. So now, same as always, I'm going to take and cut 8.5 inches off and sew it on the top and the bottom of my block. And I get this question every single time, how do I keep it from stretching? And so I'm just going to review really quick. So after I cut my selvages off of here, I measure 8.5 inches, and I use a ruler. I don't use my mat normally to measure because you get a more accurate measurement if you use an actual ruler. So now that I know that my block is 8.5 inches, I use my 8.5 inch square, and I chop off my 2 strips, and I lay them across the top and the bottom. And when I sew with, you see that looks pretty, with the strip to the feed dogs. And so when that strip gets fed through and it does this, what happens is it shrinks up just a tiny bit. And that also prevents these seams from going the wrong direction. And so I always sew it with my strip towards the feed dogs. And so if you guys will just tell me what dates work for you, I can set up a finishing session for you to do your sashing and how to set your blocks and maybe finish some of your bonus blocks. So you guys tell me what days you're available. And I do Zoom and sews all the time. You just have to look on the Facebook page to see when we're doing them. And for you guys that know, 90% of the time our Zoom passcode is so happy. So just let me know and we'll do that. So there she goes. Really fast. This block is coming together. This particular summer sampler is going to end up going to my granddaughter. She's going to get this one. You know, the little one that knocked down the entire design wall in the Summer Sampler Series, her. All right, so when you press this, try not to stretch it. If you notice, there's almost no wave at all in mine because I sewed with the feed dogs downward, and that really, really, really helps. And so I'm gonna flip this downward. And now I'm just going to take and set that seam and press it flat on both the top and the bottom. And then I'm just gonna roll that back. And I'm gonna take my fingers, I'm gonna feel that and give it a press. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to create any waves in that sashing. Whenever you put a border or a sashing either on a block or on a quilt, you want to be careful not to create any ripples or waves. And so if you notice that lays really flat, and I like that. So what causes those ripples and waves is when you have one of the pieces, either the bottom or the top piece, gets stretched out and distorted. And when that happens, then your block ends up with these funky little waves. I don't know, in this neck of the country, we call it wonky. If you get a wonky block, I don't know what you guys call that. And so I'm just going to make sure that mine is not stretched. I'm going to give it a good press. And now I can put the other two pieces across the top and the bottom. Just going to give it a little chop. This is going to be bigger than what I need, and I'm going to come back and trim it. Just going to lay it on top and lay it on the bottom and do the same thing. Sew it with the strip side towards the feed dogs. Does anybody have any questions about the Summer Sampler Series? Anything that I've covered that you have any questions and you were like, wow, she didn't answer that question? I'd be happy to answer that. Does anybody have any questions? Anything you'd like to share with me? Who's going to get your summer sampler? That's what I want to know. Who are you making this quilt for? Are you making it for you? Are you making it for a friend, somebody you love? As you guys can tell, I'm making two summer samplers. The one behind me is going to be for my granddaughter. And this one that I'm making here with batiks is going to be mine. And I'm going to finish them in different ways. The batik that I'm working on is going to be finished on point. If you're going to make this quilt on point, you only need 13 blocks, not 16. If you're going to sew it straight of grain, then you need 16 like I did in the quilt behind me. But if you're going to set these on point, you're going to use only 13 blocks. And so when we get together and do our Zoom to finish this up, then I will talk to those of you who want to do it on point and show you how to set your blocks, but you're going to need yardage for that. And so I will post on the website a handout that has how to calculate the yardage for your blocks on point. So if you want to set them on point, you like that look on your quilt, let me know and I will post that for you. All right, so now the last one, and I'm going to sew it like I did the other ones, face down, and then give it a trim. And then this block is done. All right, almost finished. Look at this. It is 8:30. This is like the speed block. All right, so now when I trim this block, I do the same thing. I have my seam. I check it out. I set it first. Then I flip it. I press it towards the corner first to keep it from getting wavy on me. And I check it out to make sure I don't have any major boo-boos. And then I'm just going to use my 12.5-inch rulers to trim this up. My 12.5-inch ruler is one of my favorite tools. So if you cannot afford a ton of rulers, buy yourself an 8.5-inch ruler because it's a pretty common size. And get yourself a 12.5-inch ruler because you can use that for a lot of blocks. There are a lot of blocks that finish either 8.5 or 12.5. And if your blocks are smaller than that, you can always trim them with those two rulers. So if you cannot afford a ton of rulers, those two are must-haves. And also a smaller mat like this one that just rotates very easily. This mat in particular, I've had a long, long time, and it is 12 by 18. It's a great size for cutting blocks, trimming things, and you can spin it around on a table. So you don't have to have a fancy rotating mat. You can just use your current mat. All right. I'm going to trim that off. And now I'm just going to give this one good last press, and voila, I am done with block number 12. And I just want to thank you guys for joining me for the Summer Sampler Series. If you will look on the website, we have a retreat coming up in June. We also have a couple of other activities, and I'm going to be doing a few recorded lessons on free motion quilting. I'm going to do one on piecing crumb blocks with your scraps. I'm going to show you how to make little tiny hourglass blocks and a lot of other things. So if you will go to the YouTube channel and subscribe, you will get notifications whenever we have new stuff. And if you go to the Facebook page and you hit like, you'll get notices of the Zoom calls that we do, lessons, other events, and things that are happening. But other than that, it is 8:30. You should be done now with block 12. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you guys all very soon. Bye, friends. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye for now. Until next time.